Neapolitan-style pizza. And if you're not familiar with that, you need to jump on our blog and watch that video because it's amazing and it has changed the way that I do pizza at home. And so he comes to us from a background with a love and a passion from more of the breads and sourdough and things like that. And so we've got to incorporate this somehow outside on the grill. So tell us what we're going to be making today.
We're making beef shawarma. Has anybody had shawarma before? Honestly, shawarma's got to be the greatest thing. I think it's one of those sandwiches that's not really a sandwich. But what's cool is that you can make the bread at home. So that's what we're going to show you. That's like the main focus. We want to make a sourdough style kind of pita bread. We're going to call it pita bread, but it's actually called a sage bread. So technically, anytime we were cooking like on a big surface, it would be a sage bread.
This is truly how Brandon is always with all of his classes. There's a history lesson involved. There's so many things that we get to learn. It's not just one recipe. It's pounds and pounds of knowledge. And I always tell them, if I could just take a little bit of what's in there, I will feel really happy with what I know in the kitchen. So Brandon is also helping to reshape the culinary industry here in Utah. You may be familiar with Oak Firewood Kitchen down in Draper. He is the mastermind behind that. If you've ever had their goat cheese sampler, I'm telling you, it is worth the drive just to have that bread with the goat cheese. So good. But also Dirty Bird, and where else?
I was at Lebanon for a while with Chef Todd, so you guys might have saw him earlier. I was beating Stevens for 3.5 years, so sandwiches were a thing. So I think that my passion for bread kind of started, I had a little cafe at the U, I started making my own bread, and that was like, I was 27, so 10 years. 10 years ago.
We don't say how old we are anymore. But it's fun to see all the different places that he's been able to help impact within the Salt Lake Valley. Currently, he's a protein specialist at Cisco. So if you have really great meat at a lot of your, I'm getting too close, sorry. A lot of your restaurants, we can thank Brandon for helping educate them to grow the meat offerings that they have in a lot of local restaurants. So he teaches classes here, but we just love having him a part of what we do. Sorry, am I still too close? I just love Brandon, okay? So without anything else we need to say, I feel like you guys are just going to ask questions along the way. He has so much knowledge in this head of his, so you guys are in for a treat. So thank you for coming.
So I kind of want to start with the bread. So I think in general, so I didn't really put it in words. I don't think that kind of stuff ahead of time. So the shawarma bread, pita bread, is really kind of fun because I kind of grew up in Italian-style pizzas, and if you kind of break down the languages of the area, pizza is actually the word for pita in the Naples dialect. So you can kind of trace things back to like pita bread and these styles of flatbreads is how actual pizza started. So because of that, I kind of like started to find the roots of what's behind pizza, and that's where I found shawarma. And what's really exciting about shawarma, it started in Turkey as a doner kebab and kind of moved throughout the Levantine area of the Middle East and turned into shawarma, right? So I want to start with this bread. So this bread is actually called a sage bread. So it'll look like pita, it'll taste like pita, but just so you know, if you were ever at a Lebanese style bakery, it would be a sage or even a Levan bread, like those style of breads are what it is, okay? So we'll make that first. So it's really simple. So these ingredients, you should already have at home. And there's nothing complicated about this. It is actually a lot like my pizza recipe, but we're just gonna use all-purpose flour at this point because we don't have to use the 00 flour, and also 00 flour make it a little too stretchy, so by the time we're gonna put it on the grill, it starts to fall apart. So we'll want something with a little bit more protein, so you could use a bread flour if you wanted to, but if you've got all-purpose amount, that's the one that I think that you should use, okay? So I'm just gonna mix in the yeast. I know a lot of people will think that's crazy. So yeast and sugar, I'm just gonna throw in first and mix it around. I think the distribution of those ingredients throughout the flour are more important than checking it. And we use the yeast here all the time. If for some reason you left your yeast in your refrigerator for 6-7 months without using it, you would want to prove it ahead of time with a little bit of water, a little bit of sugar to make sure that this still works, okay? So, what I've kind of created here, I don't know if you can kind of see, is sort of a well method of making the bread. And so what we're doing is just mixing. And I wouldn't normally use a glove, but I have to do other things this on, and there's no sink up here to wash my hands, so don't judge me. So I am leaving the salt and the oil out. So there's a reason why we leave the oil out, because we're wanting to lengthen the gluten that's in here, and this would shorten the gluten. So whenever you're hearing like shortening, shortening is meant to shorten the actual gluten. Oh, am I losing it? I'm just bad at that. So this will shorten the gluten. Okay, go ahead. There isn't any salt in the recipe. So it is, don't tell anybody, this is the secret though that you guys are gonna know. It's 20 grams per recipe that you do. So what's nice about this recipe, because it is in grams, and I know that seems scary sometimes, but that way you can double, you can triple, you can quadruple, and it doesn't matter. So if you were to use volume, you would have to then start to adjust it as you doubled and tripled, because volume recipes just aren't always identical for each cup you were to grab. So if you don't already have a gram scale at home, I suggest if you want to make awesome bread, and honestly any other recipes, if you want them exact every time, you'll be able to double and triple and quadruple them. Measuring them out in grams is very helpful. I'm pretty sure it only costs you about $10 or $11 in here. Just grab a scale, it's worth your time, it's worth your money. So what I'm going to do is just mix that until there's no dry flour. So this is very important because you're wanting all that flour to be hydrated. And then what we're going to do is just kind of forget about that for a second. We're just going to let it rest. And what that's going to do is help the strands of gluten get longer and stronger. And so if we were to add the salt's going to tighten those up and make it harder to mix, for one. And for two, it's actually going to mess with our, can you grab the sourdough starter? That one that we made? Yes. Yeah. So then we're going to add sourdough starter as well. So, but we don't want the salt to actually kill off the bacteria. It's very important that you just kind of give it as much time as you possibly can. I think a lot of people are very comfortable adding the salt in with their sourdough starter and with their yeast, which is totally fine. If you've done it and your grandma taught you to do it that way, continue to do it that way. I just think that my starters are a little more fragile maybe, and so I don't like to add the salt until they're at 20 or even 30 minutes past the time of mixing with oh, you're good. So now that we've got these incorporated, we're just going to let them rest a little bit. And like I say, the more that you let the bread rest, the better that the gluten is going to actually come across. And then when you flatten these out, it'll stick together really nicely. All right, so we've got no dry flour. We've got our sourdough starter mixed in. And we're just going to let that hang out over here. All right, so now what I would suggest for this recipe is that your bread, it's really easy to make ahead of time because it'll last in the fridge for days, okay? So that's why I started with that one. So I think that if you were gonna do a day of, you would wanna start early with the bread because it does take a couple of hours to really cool really nicely and go right. And then the rest of this now recipe would be done now, right? So if we did this last night or did it this morning, now with the beef can also marinate up to overnight. You want to give it a couple of hours. It's really nice. The longer that you can give the enzymes to kind of break down the meat, the better. I did ours overnight that you'll see and you'll taste. But we'll kind of show you what this looks like here. All right, so these are a lot of fun ingredients. So if you look in here for the beef marinade, so how many of you guys have marinated with yogurt before? So usually it's a pretty common thing that you would do with chicken, right? You ever done it with beef at all? Okay. So beef shawarma, this is what's really traditional, is that they'll use rather an olive oil and lemon kind of side of things, or they'll use yogurt. And so what we're gonna do is the yogurt style. And there's a few other ingredients in here. Are you familiar with any of these other ones that are in here? How about 7 Spice? Did anybody do 7 Spice before? 7 Spice is amazing. So it's basically all of the delicious cookie spices, all in the same thing. So it's coriander, now I'm gonna blank out. Nutmeg, clove, allspice, all of those, and black pepper. So the only one that's not real cookie spice is black pepper, but it's all the rest of them. So it smells amazing. Feel free to come and check it out if you want. And the other one, Aleppo pepper. So Aleppo pepper is very specific. The idea is that it comes from Aleppo. I think it's hard for us to regulate that nowadays, right? Especially with everything that's going on over there, it's kind of hard. But Aleppo pepper is just sweeter, and it's a little bit more hydrated than you might see in a chili powder, and it's more mild. I would think that it would be like, it would measure somewhere between a red bell pepper and a jalapeno. It's not super spicy, but you get a ton of floral like notes from it, so it's amazing. And then we have sumac. Has anybody ever used sumac before? So sumac's amazing. So sumac is like, if you didn't have vinegar, this is a way to add it. It's incredibly acidic, incredibly floral, and the cool thing about it is if you've ever gone on 7th East by Liberty Park, they have sumac trees that are in the median. So you can, I mean, in the springtime, you can see the little puffs of these, and you just dry them out. We've harvested them a couple times as chefs because we thought we were cool, like foraging, right? Okay. So then the obvious ingredients: garlic and onion. I think that I'm not a big fan of that canned garlic. Like if you just buy, I gotta have a head in here somewhere. If you just buy a head of garlic, it's just the easiest thing. It dries out after a while. You just buy a head of garlic and smash it. It's totally worth your time, okay? So we're just gonna mix these ingredients together real quick. Any questions up to this point? No? Good question. So you can't get them anywhere. I've seen Aleppo and sumac like in parts of Harmon's, right? You can find some of those sometimes. But the 7 Spice and some of the yogurts and other ingredients that we're using here, you want to go to a Middle Eastern style market. So there's a few around here. There's one off of 45th and 9th called Charity Market, I think. There's Specialty Market on Port Union. There's a bakery here on State Street, not too far away, but there's all these spices there as well. I want to say that it used to be called Spices and Breads or something, and now they've moved it to some other name. But you have to go to one of those types of areas, or honestly, I hate to support them, but Amazon. Amazon has all this stuff. They usually come in about 2 days, so don't be scared either with that. Okay, so I'm gonna just get yogurt in this big pot here. We'll get these spices. Grab me a lemon. Is it in there somewhere? I just didn't see it, I'm sorry. So we're gonna smash this garlic up. When it's in the peel like this, the best way is just to be like fairly violent with it. And we want this pretty puree to get throughout everything. And try not to throw it all around the kitchen. So a lot of these spices are antioxidants, which I mean sounds really healthy and everything. But what it also did is before refrigeration, these would help it so the meat wouldn't go bad. So things like garlic and onions and these spices actually, and the yogurt for that matter, because of the enzymes, help it so you can marinate this at room temperature without having issues. And so if you look at how cuisines are built, a lot of them are built off those things, and they just didn't have refrigeration. I mean, even the US up until the 30s, refrigeration wasn't a normal thing. And so these recipes are older than that, and they just work off those things. So when you see lamb and they're marinated at room temperature, a lot of times you'll see these spices, garlic, things like that, because they didn't really get so gamey and so gnarly that they wouldn't be worth it anymore. So with these antioxidants, not only are they for flavor, but they also preserve the food in a way that they can be ready for cooking. Yeah?
What type of beef is it again?
That's a good question. So the beef is kind of up to you. You could do whatever you wanted with this recipe, especially if you're going to marinate it overnight. I think that a little bit more fat is better, so you want to pick a few cuts. So the cut that I did, and I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with it, it's actually called chuck flaptail. Has anybody heard of that cut before? So chuck flaptail is also called boneless short ribs. So you ever seen boneless short ribs at the supermarket? That's what this is. It's amazing. I don't think you can get a better cut, in my opinion, because you can cut it and grill it into Denver steaks, which are my favorite steak on the planet. And a lot of restaurants, you'll see them on the menus. They're starting to come back. I think they were really popular maybe, in the 90s, late 80s, Denver steaks were a breakfast steak. They were all over, and they were super cheap. They were amazing. And now Chuck Flaptail's at like $13 a pound, so it's not as cheap as it used to be. So, but it's still an amazing cut, and that's why I used it. And it was donated by Cisco, they just don't know it yet. Yeah. Good question. So as long as you're doing one that has natural enzymes in it, I don't think that it matters. You just don't want to have one that has like citric acid added, or sometimes they'll have like actual vinegar in it added, and you'll be surprised if you look at the label of yogurt. A lot of them will have it. They'll have some enzymes, but anytime they say citric acid or that it's been pasteurized and they don't have live active bacteria, you're not going to get the same tenderization of it, because you're looking for those enzymes to actually break down sinew in the meat overnight. But if you're not looking to, if you could do this with a normal steak too. So you could say that you were going to do this with like a New York, and I would only marinate it for maybe 30 or 40 minutes. So then you're not going to get that as much action, but you're going to get the caramelization of the yogurt on the meat, and that's going to help out a ton. So you don't have to be exact on this onion. The finer that you go on the onion, the less that you'll see it. So if you have those kids that are like, I don't like onions, definitely chop these. You could even puree them in the blender if you wanted to get them all out. I think that little chunks make a ton of sense, especially for this recipe. And if you were to get a shawarma style thing, it's going to be marinated. And sometimes as they stack it, you'll actually have pieces of onion in between meat. So that's a normal thing that you'll see. And then we're just going to go lemon. The yogurt that I have is pretty tart. It's a Greek yogurt and it's been strained. So it's pretty tart, so we don't have to do a bunch of acidity, but we want just a little bit. So you can kind of see like, the color looks a little gnarly, but it's awesome. You can see all those spices in there, and those will open up so much. Speaking of, I better check on these so we don't burn them, because those are the ones you're going to eat. Those are looking good. All right, so now, and olive oil as well. It seems kind of like you wouldn't need it as much, and obviously if you have a really fatty piece of meat like I have, you don't need as much of the olive oil, but this will help caramelize that outside. You get a nice color as well. And olive oil is in every one of these recipes, if you notice, because in that part of the world, they fries with olive oil and just use it on everything, okay? All right, beef. All right, so what I have here is chuck flaptail. Very exciting piece of meat. It's what I do for a living, so I get really excited about this kind of thing. But I don't get excited about that. But what kind of meat do you guys think that you might use for this type of application? What do you have at home that you think might work out? Any ideas? Flank steak? Flank steak would work for sure. I think flank steak, you just want to limit the amount of marination that you have on it. I think that the longer you marinate, some of those pieces of meat, what they'll do is they'll get grainy. So same with like a New York or a prime rib. If you're gonna do this type of thing, the longer that you marinate it, when you cook it, you'll get graininess. It'll be breaking down that meat, which a tougher piece of meat might work a little bit better, but I would definitely do this on a flank steak. I just wouldn't do it for very long. So with chuck flaptail, on this top piece, there's actually a sinew that runs on the top of it. And since we're chopping this into pieces, I'm not gonna be super perfect with it, but you just wanna get that off, because if you don't, it's gonna end up being a little bit tougher. And even with the long marination process, it's not gonna break down like super thick sinew like that, okay? So I'm just giving that a little up. And then because we're kind of longer cooking it on the grill, and also we don't want to have it overcooked. The idea of a shawarma is that you'll cut off the outside, just caramelize it nice, and then put it back on the grill, okay? If you ever had like Brazilian style barbecue, same thing. So Brazilian style barbecue, funny enough, was influenced a lot by the Lebanese immigrants that came in. And then if you want to get real serious, because of the wars in Lebanon in the early 1800s and late 1900s, they went everywhere. And in the process took their cuisine with them. And so you can see versions of shawarma all across the world. So, like I said, in Brazil, their barbecue is definitely influenced by Turkish and Lebanese, but they also, their Lebanese immigrants have a thing called, they call it barbecue, Arabic barbecue is what they call it there. So, churrasco. So, they have that there, and then also, if you've ever been to a Mexican restaurant that serves al pastor, that actually comes from tacos from Pueblo, Mexico, with Lebanese immigrants as well. So you can actually see that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about shawarma is that it has influence in things all across the world. And funny enough, well, the version that we're eating was invented in Berlin. So it's a totally global dish, which is amazing. So just giving these a little shot. We're going to cook these up soon too. Yeah, and how I got into this dish was actually I was opening a Mexican restaurant in Farmington, Utah. And in the process, we were kind of studying al pastor because we had bought one of what's called a trompa, which is made for al pastor. And I was trying to figure out recipes for it. And I think I went down some rabbit hole on YouTube, and then there was no coming back from it. I found out about all kinds of turning meats and how on the grill and different versions of it all across everywhere. It's amazing to me. Yes. Yep. We can take that. We can use it for the lighting. So we're going to act like we fast forwarded a little bit. We're going to let this kind of hang out. And then we're going to start making some of our sauces. Okay? So this is probably the most important part of this dish is the sauces, which is really exciting. So, first up, we have the white sauce. So I've got an ingredient in this called labneh. Have you guys ever used this at all? It's a fun ingredient. So technically, it's a cheese made from the bacteria is the kefir or kefir. It's like, so if you've ever made like water, it's sort of like kombucha, if that makes sense. So it's that style of fermentation, but it's with cream and milk, and then make a cheese out of it. I mean, technically, it's closer to like a sour cream than it is a cheese, but I think it's amazing regardless.
Where'd you buy it?
Same kind of place. So it'll be in those Middle Eastern style markets. You could substitute yogurt here. It's not a big deal. But if you look at how thick this is, that is the difference. If you were to get a really strained Greek yogurt, you could probably fake the same idea. But we actually are going to thin this out a little bit. So you would just not want to, thin out any. I'm going to add some salt to it. This is getting the sumac as well. Some olive oil. Do some mint. So this I feel like is the real key to everything. Well,
There's another board on the bottom of your rack.
we'll start with it. I know the mint you can already smell right away, right? I also bought this at that Lebanese market, so I'm not saying they have better produce than anybody else, but it sure smells like it. So this one, what I'm kind of wanting to do is all these like big stems, I don't like, okay? And the big stems, they're gonna be woody. They'll still taste really amazing, but because we're gonna have it's gonna be a sauce, we're gonna try and pull most of these out and get just the leaf. Sorry, what was that?
I think it might be someone back there.
Oh.
Do you want another?
What's that?
Do you need another knife?
No.
You're good.
All right, so we're gonna give that a little rough chop. So if you go kind of on the thinner side, then you don't have to cut a bunch. And also with a really sharp knife, you're not gonna be bruising the herb. And you can kind of see like the herb's not bruised, it's just sliced. And that's really important. As you bruise the herb, you're releasing essential oils, which can be a good thing. So there's certain recipes, especially in Italian, where they just say like smack the herb, right? Or if you're making a cocktail to just like smack the rosemary, and that'll give you enough of the essential oils for the dish that you're making. But here, we want to kind of trap those oils as much as we can and not release them until we're actually biting into the sandwich. And what this is going to do is all those crazy flavors of meats and all the different spices that are amazing. So this, with the yogurt, with the mint, the sumac, what that's going to do is just kind of break up the dish a little bit. And so this same thing would be made with tahini in Israel, because in Israel they believe that meat can't be served with cheese or dairy. So they would just do this with tahini. So you can see across the whole Middle East, there is a version of this exact thing. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go back to our dough just a little bit. I want to show you how it kind of expanded. So it's way smoother now that it's just rested for a minute. And this would be the point that we would add all the olive oil, and then we would move that all together. So this one in the recipe, what you'll see that is divided into 150 grams. And you'll see that 150 grams is really essential to be able to make like a really nice 12-inch style pita bread. So that's what we're looking for. Okay? Question, yeah?
How long should we make that?
So in the recipe I say 20 minutes. So 20 minutes is like kind of my key thing for all of my bread recipes. Because 20 minutes, what that does is relaxes the gluten enough that where you can use it again. So anytime where you're doing like a turn, you would then wait 20 minutes and then you would do a turn again, or you would wait 20 minutes and add your salt and olive oil, or wait 20 minutes and add your yeast and things like that. So I kind of broke it down that way in this recipe, but because we're not depending all on the trapping of the air in the bread, we don't have to let it rest as long. So most bread recipes, especially if you're making like a white bread, it probably take a minimum of 3 hours start to finish of like resting. This one you could do in a matter of an hour and a half, because you're not depending on it like everything being trapped in. What you're looking for is a really hot oven and enough gluten to hold together to where it puffs. And that's what you're looking for, which is really exciting. Okay, so we have the red sauce. So the white sauce is here, really exciting. And the red sauce is here. So this red sauce has a red pepper paste. Also, you would get it at that Middle Eastern. You can see there's a bunch of different ones. There's a sweet, there's a mild, there's a hot. So you can kind of go as intense as you want in it. And you could also make this yourself if you wanted to roast off red peppers or red jalapenos, that kind of thing, and roast it off yourself and then make a puree of it. I would think that this, because it lasts forever in the refrigerator, is a really awesome condiment to be able to add to things. And you could also use it in the place of like tomato paste in a lot of recipes and add a little bit more flair, which is fun. So it's something I always have in my pantry. So I'm going to start with that. We've also got salt, always. We've got olive oil, once again, throughout all the recipes. So this is another ingredient that maybe you haven't heard of, is pomegranate molasses. Have any of you used that in the past? This is the most amazing ingredient for vinaigrettes. Oops. So it is very, it is very acidic. It's got a little bit of sweet to it, but it's really made to be used in like a savory aspect. So I use it here because a lot of the shawarma red sauces, like the chili sauces, they'll have sugar and vinegar and all this other stuff. And so I've kind of crossed planes into more on the Lebanese side to really get like the sweetness that's natural. Okay? And then also, to make it a little bit more on the creamy side, we're adding tahini as well, which is a sesame paste. You guys all know what that is? You should be adding it to your hummus. It makes hummus amazing. Okay? So I try and get the ones that have the words that I don't understand on them. And I think if you do that, it seems more authentic. If you're getting one at like Sam's Club and it's like, oh, roasted sesame, like I think that's the one to steer away from. So this is as ethnic as you can get with it. And you can see that this sauce is just like, it's so bright, it's so amazing. And so without that tahini, it's kind of a little dull. So the tahini just kind of rounds everything out and it makes it healthy. Like sesame's healthy for you, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah. So once again, it's all about the condiments here. So you have these two sauces. You have the meat that's cooking, right? We're gonna add some garlic to that too. Because the raw garlic is gonna add a spiciness that will be pretty unique. Now, if for some reason you're not into garlic, which would be horrible, I'm sorry for you. But if you're not, you could leave this out of it. It's not a deal breaker. But I do want to make sure that it's all kind of smashed up and chopped up really nicely, because this garlic, I'm not looking to bite into it. If you bite into raw garlic, you already know it's super spicy. So if I can smash this into a paste here, what that's going to do is make it so it's throughout the entire thing and not just in one bite. Okay. Okay. Questions up to this point? Let me check on the meat one more time. I think we're ready to go with that. Okay, one more little thing. All right, so we're going to skewer this up real quick. Once again, another thing that seems scary, right? And it should be kind of scary. Like my girls try and do sword recipes all the time. So what you'll want to do though is you really need this type of skewer. So if you have this kind of thing at home, that's amazing, fantastic. You already have it. If you don't, I also bought these at Cherry Market. I think they're $1.80 a piece. They're totally worth this to have. And I use them for Brazilian style barbecue as well. I'll spit onto these type of things. And Brazilian style ones usually have a piece of wood that goes right here, and that piece of wood will burn up in your Traeger. So if you're wanting to use a Traeger and you don't have a Brazilian style barbecue, this helps out a ton, okay? So we're just skewering this up. What I'm kind of wanting to do when I do skewer is try and keep the grains going the same way. And if we keep the grains going the same way, then as we slice it, all the same cut against the grain is going to continue, okay? So that's super important. So if you put too much marinade on, it makes it a little bit hard. So, in all technicalities, we want to be authentic here. A shawarma, a lot of the time, would be more like that al pastor style taco. You would slice thin and stack it. But we don't have a rotisserie here that I know of at AB that they sell. So we're charged with creating an idea of this that would fit on the Traeger. So, Traeger didn't even sponsor me. Yet. So we're going to skewer these up. We'll throw them in the grill. And because of, TV magic, we've already got one ready to show you what it looks like afterwards. And if we wait long enough, you can kind of see the difference, and you'll be able to taste the beef when it's had the marinade on overnight, and when it's only had the marinade on for 15 minutes. And you really taste a huge difference, but I think in the process you'll see that it's really not as big a deal as you might think. And the important thing is to have that outer layer that's going to caramelize and add flavor and add texture on the outside of it is just as much or more important than the marination that's going to tenderize your meat. Okay? I love the purple ball. All right, I know not all of you can see over here on this side of it, but so this is what we're looking for. So you can see that like the meat's caramelized really nicely. It's got some good color on it. And then what we're gonna do is just slice that really thin. And that's gonna top our awesome shawarmas. So I don't know if you saw here earlier, but apparently it was way too high. But I set it at about 450. So I think that you need that really hot outer temperature to sear the outside of it, and it'll kind of slow cook on the inside to a certain degree. But we're gonna slice off the edges, and if we still see it like, you know, really rare, we're gonna put it back on the grill. And that's the whole point of this style of barbecue, is so that you kind of have options, all right? Now, we're gonna roll out some bread.
How long were you putting it on there before you pulled it off?
That's a good question. It was probably, I put it, it's been about 35, 40 minutes. So I put it on about 5 minutes before we started. So, somewhere there, like 50 minutes. Yeah.
When do you want your bread?
Yeah, can you grab the bread? Yeah. So she's gonna grab the bread. I'm gonna do like a little cleanup session because I feel like I'm just a mess up here right now. Any questions up to this point? Go ahead.
So what's the difference between this and a gyro?
So technically what's funny is that it's the exact same thing. So a shawarma, technically they would do mostly with beef. A gyro is mostly with lamb, right? Lamb and mutton. And then in Turkey they would do it with lamb and veal a lot of the times. Because they would keep their milk cows. So a lot of people think that veal is like this horrible thing, but veal is a byproduct of the milk industry. So if you're milking a cow, if you don't have lady cows, they can get milk. And the males, what they'll do is they'll slaughter the males before they get to age because they don't have anywhere to pasture them. And so veal is a byproduct of the dairy industry. And so if you have a dairy farm, 99% of the time, you also have veal. So it seems cruel, it seems horrible, but at the same time, it's just a byproduct. If you like drinking milk or you like having dairy products, that's what ends up happening. Because if they don't have a farm, they can put it out to pasture, that's what it is. So usually veal and lamb get into it. Sometimes they'll stack with veal and they'll put lamb fat at the top to strip down. But yeah, gyro is all lamb. And so same idea. So what's funny is, okay, so once you've had your dough rested long enough, you would portion into these 150 gram balls. So it looks just like pizza dough because it pretty much is pizza dough. I don't like adding a ton of olive oil to my pizza dough, so that's the only big difference here. So this one's got a decent amount of air to it. Because I like want it to look sort of round, I kind of do this like rotating process. But it's not necessarily has to be round. It can be whatever size and shape that you feel like that day, whatever you're feeling. Okay? So let's get at this point. Once again, it looks like pizza. We're going to throw it on this Traeger that's here back behind because I lit the other one on fire. If you ever made a sourdough before, usually you would get your oven as hot as you possibly can. And the reason for that is that you'll have expansion of the bread without having the outside get hot. So you want it as hot as possible so it steams itself. Okay, so when you're doing the sourdough bread, that's the whole idea. And this isn't any different. We want it hot enough that it'll expand without having any issues with getting hard on the outside.
Would this work in your oven then?
Yes, it would. Yeah, it would work out great in the oven. I make pita in my oven at home all the time. So I'm gonna give it just a little flip. Let's go to the next one on. And you want enough flour that it's not sticking to you, but you don't want so much flour that it's like all over the inside of your grill or oven. So you can kind of shake that off if you want. There it is. So super easy to make. You saw it right in front of us. It's not crazy. We're gonna build a nice. Oh, can you grab me some of the veggies that we got? Yeah.
You said you make this ahead of time. Would you just make the dough ahead of time? Or
Yep.
And then cook it the day of?
Yep. I would make this. So this I made last night.
Okay.
I think it was like 2:30 in the morning. It was really late. But yeah, then I put it in the fridge. And so this one, once again, we're not worried about how much it's going to rise or anything. As long as it's covered in the refrigerator, this will last for like 5 or 6 days. So you can go way ahead and say like, hey, on Monday I'm going to make this, and it's only going to get cooked on Saturday. So
like after step 6, it says let your last rest. You actually start to put it in and then put it in the fridge?
yep.
Or put it in the fridge and then take it out and let it rest?
So if you're going to leave it for multiple days, you could throw it straight in the fridge. I think if you're going to use it in the next few hours or the next day, I might let it rest and just look for it to look like it's starting to it's lively. If you put it in the fridge before it starts to kind of rise, it'll never rise. It'll stay like that all the time. But if you let it go just a little bit, it'll rise up a little. Go ahead. So yeast is kind of up to you. In all seriousness, I hate the idea of using yeast. If you can use your sourdough, that's better. So that would be my preference. But if you were just using the Red Star, whatever you can get in the grocery store, there's no issues with that or any other ones. I don't think that if you can get your hands on fresh yeast, I would use fresh yeast if you could. I just don't know anybody in town that sells it. Yep, you can use instant yeast or whatever the other alternative is. I feel like they're exactly the same. They just tell you that it's one's worth more money or not.
So if you put it in the refrigerator, how long do you want to take it out and let it rest before you roll
This is still cold. So, yep, I wouldn't let it out at all, to be honest with you. All right, so let's build one of these up. So hot. So if you have over a sheet pan like this, what you can do is just cut off the outer layers, just like if you were at a churrascaria, you know? So then what I'm going to do is one side, we're going to have the white sauce. One side, we're going to have the red sauce. We're going to stack up some of the meat. Some of the veggies. So the veggies that are really traditional, obviously cucumbers and tomatoes. If you've ever had a shawarma, on a New York City food truck stand, or we had one in Paris recently. It was amazing. Even in Paris. Okay? They'll always put red onions, cucumbers, and tomatoes. And then this is one that you'll get if the owner of the shawarma place is Lebanese. Because these are Lebanese style pickled turnips. They sound gnarly, they taste delicious. Okay? And look how beautiful they are. So this technically is the finished dish. Okay? Very fun, and it's a different way of viewing your meats. It's a different way of doing it. I think if you show somebody like this, if you're a grill, it's not like a steak and potatoes, right? It's something different that somebody else is doing. It's unique to you. It's also exciting because it spreads culture to other people. You can let it go too long, but it's still delicious, so it's fine. All right.
Is there an advantage to making the sauces ahead of time, or do you make them fresh right before you?
I don't think that there's an advantage to it. I think that if you were to have extra of this sauce, that it would be great to throw in your refrigerator. It would last forever. So if you made too much, that'd be fine. I don't think there's a real advantage to making it ahead of time. If it was just going to save you time so that you could be with your friends and you had everything ready and all you were doing was grilling the meat and slicing it and sending it out and you had all the bread ready, you could also buy this style bread at those markets as well. Some of them have, like the specialty market on Fort Union makes this style of bread fresh every single day. So if you didn't want to be as adventurous, you could do that. Okay, I want to show you just one more thing before we start making all of these, okay? There is a thing called a manaush, which, just because I'm a pizza guy, I got really stoked about, but it's basically Levantine style pizza. And who knows, maybe this was first before the Neapolitans got a hold of it, okay? So I'm going to throw this on the grill, and then I'm going to top it with some ingredients. And so the ingredients that I have that are really traditional to this style of bread will be, so this is za'atar. You guys ever played with za'atar before? It's like thyme, sesame, sumac. It's already mixed together. It's just a great mixture. And then I just thinned it out with a little olive oil, just like a powder. And then I have some sheep's milk cheese. It's like a fresh cheese. Also, you get at that same market. You could also get a Mexican market, like queso panela would be a really close to the same idea. And you'll see this one bubbles up really nice. All right, but that's pretty much it. So we've got our meat, we've got our sauces, we've got our fresh vegetables. That's exactly what we want to accomplish today. Any questions? Go ahead. I did. So that's one that, I don't know if anybody else does that. It's just a thing that I've always done. But in European baking, a lot of time, the sourdough starters are used way more for flavor than they are for lifting, okay? And so when you learn how baking through that style, what you'll see is that they'll have sourdough starters in every single one of their breads, or what's called pre-ferments. So in Italians, they'll have massa madre is a normal one. In France, they'll have poulish. They're these pre-ferments that actually make the bread taste better, but they're not using it to lift the bread. They're using it for taste and for texture of the actual, so you can get more rise out of it. So it's a really fun situation. So that's where I got the inspiration for the Neapolitan dough. They'll have starters, they'll have pre-ferments, but they'll still add a little yeast, just very little. And so most of my breads, that's what I try and do as well. That way you don't have to worry about your starter being super lively and gonna rise your bread as much as you want it there for, you can keep it in the fridge and just use it straight out of the fridge, or use discard, sourdough discard. Yeah. So that's one of my favorite uses for sourdough discard, is adding to breads that don't need the actual yeast. Great question. All right. Anything else? Thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate it. We're going to slice some of this stuff up for you so you guys can try it.